Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to give you a quick abbreviated show for tonight. As you can hear, I'm feeling less than 100%, something going around. But I wanted to touch base with you about what happened today in the Karen Reed case because it was plentiful. What I can tell you is this. Opening statements is where you introduce what you expect the facts will show. That's the most important key. That's what the whole case is about. It's like, what are the facts going to show? Let's talk about both sides. First, the prosecution. I found Hank Brennan put on probably one of the best opening statements I've possibly ever seen. The reason is this opening statement was only approximately 35 minutes or so. And he was able to talk about the data, the science, the admissions, the fact that nobody saw Officer O'Keefe enter the residence. All of this is going to be vital testimony. What I can tell you in the first trial, 88 Alden Lally made a kind of a mistake with the not really getting into the vehicle information. The pedestrian strike, it was very, the DNA evidence kind of saved it, and that the pieces of the taillight were found on his clothing. But besides that, it wasn't that great, the information about the pedestrian strike. I've said all along, the best chance the defense had an acquittal outright was in the first trial when the Commonwealth's case is not nearly as good. Think of what it was in the first trial. It felt like we had got 2 weeks before we got anything of any real importance and any kind of facts, as opposed to first witness, admissions. I hit him. And then I overhear her saying it again to somebody else. Alan Jackson, during discussing on cross, when that witness was questioned, like, oh, it was 2 times last year, 3 times, kind of immaterial. But when you think of what actually occurred during those opening statements, talking about, all right, the cell phone battery temperature, I was like, what? It's like, you have that this time? And it's like, all right, I'm going to be interested to hear about that. And he said she put it into neutral and then put the car into reverse and then went backwards approximately 70 feet and hit Officer O'Keefe. The defendant put her foot to the pedal to the metal, 75%. That's an unreal fact to have. And then it was talking about Officer O'Keefe sent a text message to Jen McCabe, and then 7 seconds later, he was struck by the car. And not even roughly 10 seconds, 7 seconds. That fact is just, okay, they have this timeline down to the second, because in the first trial, there were people talking about it like, well, she connected to the Wi-Fi at this certain time and everything. And it's like, okay, all right, that doesn't really work with the timeline. This trial, they have the timeline down to the second. That's going to make a huge difference when Alan Jackson's doing what he usually does, is ask 52 questions to try to get an answer that only 10 questions probably could have sufficed, as we saw during that cross. You made your point. It was like, okay, it was inconsistent. He said 2 last year, 3. Does it really matter? No, the jury's going to be like, can we all just agree that it was at least 2 times that he heard it? And then when the other witnesses testify, but he's doing his job. That's his job, to point out the inconsistencies in the testimony. There's not really much more else he can attack him for besides that. What I can tell you is, hearing Alan Jackson's opening, it was a lot more aggressive. I think it was almost to the point of yelling. I think at some points it was effective. He was definitely playing with one hand behind his back because he couldn't talk about the ARCA witnesses. He couldn't do third-party culprit. He got all of their names in, but he didn't really do that. And one of the things Hank Brennan allowed him to do during opening, which you're not supposed to do, is argue. Openings are not for arguments. They're for facts. You don't argue during openings. That's not allowed. You argue during closings. You tell what the evidence is going to show in facts. And he definitely said the evidence was going to show a little weight, a little more than he should have. This is somebody who's been at this 30, 40 years. And that's not what a seasoned trial attorney says. This evidence will show. That's something what Lori Vallow does during her openings, a pro se defendant who's kind of getting off on representing themselves and making mockery of the judicial system. You saw the difference between Hank Brennan's like, here is the story I'm going to tell you. Here's what the facts are going to show, without actually using the words, this is what the facts are going to show, as opposed to Alan Jackson basically yelling at the jury. So I think he got his point across. Um, but I did see kind of an interesting comment by somebody on Twitter, and that was it's like what David Yannetti had going for him is he's from Massachusetts. He understands people from the Commonwealth. Alan Jackson's from California. He's an LA lawyer. This isn't the practice. This isn't LA law. You need to be able to understand and sympathize with the people you're speaking to, the jury. They need to feel that you know what it's like to be in their shoes, that they know that you're part of their community. And that was kind of a mistake. I definitely think it was a strategic decision to combat Special ADA Brennan. I think that that was two witnesses, and there was a recross. I'm almost positive if I counted correctly, which very rarely it's usually it's usually direct, cross, redirect, recross. And then it was like 2 or 3 recrosses after that, which is something you don't usually see. Special ADA Brennan is giving Alan Jackson latitude to be able to argue. I like to ask questions, stuff like that, because he knows is that if you object, you usually need to be able to, it has to be sustained. And you only object when you have to, because if you're objecting every other word or every other question, the jury's going to take note of it, and they're going to be like, they're afraid of this question. They're just trying to be, trying to block what they're trying to say, be an obstructionist. That's kind of what you don't want the jury to think. And so I think we're in for a hell of a trial, because those were not two witnesses. Well, we haven't gotten Alan Jackson's cross on Carrie Roberts. Wasn't it overkill, that cross on Natal? Yes, absolutely it was. It was very clearly, it should have ended 30 to 45 minutes ago. Like, when you're doing a cross-examination, defense attorneys like myself, they love cross. That's the best part of any trial. But you gotta know when to sit down. You got to know when you've made your point. Now you're just beating a dead horse, and now eventually you're just opening up new avenues for for Special ADA Brennan to bring him and redirect. One of the things that happened is the witness actually heard the defendant make the statement again. That never came out ever before, if I recall, in the first trial. So it's like the defendant made the statements to the firefighter, to Natali, and then he overheard it again when she said it to someone else. That never came out. And if not for this absurd, like, over-the-top cross, that might not have happened. Yeah, people are saying Alan Jackson destroyed firefighter Natali. Your thoughts? Yeah, that's from the people who really don't understand trials. The point they were making is like, it's not like Natali didn't hear the statement at all. That would have been an exceptional cross, or destroying him if it were. They're like, well, you didn't actually hear that, did you? And they're like, no, I guess I didn't. It's no, at worst, it was twice, and at best, it was 3 times, or it could have been more. And also, what it was interesting is then, back to the documentary, as I'm going to be saying throughout these whole proceedings, that documentary was a bleeping mistake. It was a mistake. And when the defendant is saying, this is my testimony, I remember I was like, oh my God, this is like the worst decision anybody's ever made before a criminal trial. That of somebody who isn't just like batshit crazy, someone who like wants to represent themselves and is completely removed from reality. That was saying, and like the unaired footage, because I think they combed through like something like 400 hours of what they recorded. And it's like, the defendant herself admits she said the words. And I had to rewind it about 3 times to make sure, did she just say she admitted to saying the words, I hit him? And I had to replay it and replay it and replay it. And I was like, she did say that. And it's like, what I think Special ADA Brennan's going to be doing throughout the case is he's going to basically have Karen Reed narrate the trial, tell her side of the story by simply just playing clips that some aired, some unaired throughout the trial. And it was so bad, because the defendant has an absolute right not to be a witness in their own trial. But when anything you say is fair game, and you do a documentary, which is pretty clear to the jury, look like a kind of a victory lap, they're going to be watching. They're going to be watching. Like, oh my God, this girl is ridiculous. And yes, I definitely think at time it was as on the recross. Alan Jackson was definitely a little unhinged. He was on tilt and he was just asking, throwing a bunch of questions, and it's like you're kind of losing it. You can't lose your composure, and it's an unforced error. And then when he tries to, because I remember on direct cross, he tries to um, try to trip the guy up with the videos, and one doesn't have timestamps, the other one has timestamps. So it's like you're trying to impeach him with a different video and or showing it a different video at a different time and applying it to what he was saying. It's like, no, two completely different situations. Um, and definitely when you're hearing that, you're like, wow, this is, I wouldn't do that on the first witness, because the reason is the inverted Sally port videos, that was in the first trial kind of like a bombshell thing that like it didn't really mean that, but it was just like, oh, what else are they hiding? But now Alan Jackson's kind of did something similar, trying to pull a fast one on the jury. So that when he comes back around and does that with Yuri, which we know in a few weeks, whenever he takes the stand, um, it's not going to have the same kind of oomph. And yes, and that's the problem, is he was the one who did it first, and he did it on the first witness. Um, and so yeah, with the defenses, it was just a lot of generalities. And I overall, I think he did what he had to. I think he did like what he could do with his arm behind his back, because he wasn't able to talk about ARCA. He wasn't able to talk about third party culprit. He kind of, but the whole thing of like this, the Alberts are this powerful, like almost crime mafia family, a powerful board of selectmen. I'm originally from Plymouth, Massachusetts. Board of selectmen have next to no power whatsoever. So that whole thing was just laughable, that whole interaction, talking about a selectman. So overall, yeah, it was, the testimony got out, and Alan Jackson just didn't need to hammer Natali the way he did. And it was just, it just didn't, you made your point and move on. As to Kerry Roberts, one of the interesting things that I don't know if it was mentioned in the first trial or I might have just forgot, was the fact that the defendant called Kerry Roberts at 5 a.m. saying John was dead. That was very interesting timing, because we know from the first trial and the evidence that the defendant approximately leaves at 12:45 a.m. from 34 Fairview. What days are you going live during the trial? I'll get to that real quickly. Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm never going to do the let me do it at the same time as trial and talk over while the people are giving testimony. I'll leave that to other YouTubers who talk about this case and kind of like, and allow people to miss it just because they want to hear their own voice. But Tuesdays and Thursdays, usually around 6:30. I'm doing a little bit earlier tonight because I have to actually be somewhere at 6:30 and not feeling the greatest. So I wanted to do it, and before my daughter went to bed. What are your thoughts on the deliberate violation and judge talking to him again? Also, do you think ARCA will testify? They don't really, if they can, they don't really have much of a choice. They don't. They're not going to have the same credibility they had. If anything, they're not going to appear independent. They're going to appear like they're bought and paid for. But that's really what the defense has. They have to just go with it. It's like, oh, they're saying it wasn't a pedestrian strike. But then when they see the communications between them, it's like, should I say this? It's not going to play well. Could some of it, yeah. Could the jury follow Alan Jackson? Yeah, he was a little all over the place. It was pretty clear. He was definitely thrown off how, like, he's like reading off a sheet of paper and everything, and Hank Brennan memorized his opening. And I was just like, damn, that's legit. Because usually, at times, what we found when I was still a prosecutor is if you do it memorizing, it almost looks like almost cocky. But the way he did it, it looked like he knew the facts so well that the jury's like, boom, I got to listen to this guy. And what he has to say, it matters. Yes, definitely. The trial does have a different vibe to it this time. I've been kind of saying that for the last like month and a half. Every time there's like a hearing, the defense does not come in with the same swagger they did in the first trial. They don't have that same oomph. and they don't have, so it definitely feels like this is going to be a completely different trial. Kerry Roberts saying, it's like what I was saying earlier, it's like 12:30, 12:45. That's when Karen Reed allegedly leaves 34 Fairview. But at 5 in the morning, she calls Kerry Roberts and says John is dead. That's significant. The reason that is significant is because they don't get back to 34 Fairview till 6 a.m. And she, from her own, what we know from testimony and like from the documentary, she finds out John is dead from her father in the hospital. So how does she know John's dead at 5 a.m., but they don't even go back to 34 Fairview till 6 a.m.? That's going to be something that that's going to be something the jury is going to be like, that's interesting. Yes, AJ reminded me of Lally last year. I think that was actually something I thought about while during the opening, that it was kind of all over the place and not really no cohesive thought. And so definitely was it acceptable that AJ switched the video to deceive the responder. I think he got slapped around by Hank Brennan when he did that. It was pretty clear that he tried to pull a fast one, and that was, like I said, really, really dumb, because the inverted Sallyport videos was such like a bombshell moment, if it were quote unquote, in the first trial, and now he's been the first one to do something deceptive, if it were. Was the cell phone the temperature of the cell phone was when John's body up top? I thought that data point was impressive. Who knew? Yeah. That wasn't even mentioned in the first trial. I knew about the grass underneath him, and I knew that was a very important part of the first trial. But the cell phone temperature, that I can't wait to hear about. It sounded like they reconfigured her phone, his phone, or her vehicle to be able to, I don't know, kind of figure out what actually happened. And they kept saying black box. So I definitely think we're going to get more more vehicle testimony in this case. What do you think of the witnesses saying, what do you think of Jackson saying witnesses will testify John went into the house? I would be shocked if somebody says that, considering the defendant herself admitted in the documentary, reason number 78,805, why she's never done the documentary, she never saw John enter the residence. Or what I said on Court TV last week, I'll actually be on tomorrow with Julie Grant at 8 a.m., is when she was asked, do we know who did this? We all know who did this, Steve. And she didn't deny it. And then when she's talking to Ted Daniels, she's like, do you know, we don't know who did this. And it's like, Jesus, like it just at least keep the same lie going. Don't just keep changing it. Yes. So it's definitely going to be it. Kerry Roberts, and like, we're going to get more into the I hit him from her. The fact that she got out of the vehicle and she's like kicking and screaming, and she goes exactly to where John is. Not Kerry Roberts, not Jen McCabe, none of them, because it's a whiteout. Everybody knows what it's like in whiteout conditions. You can't see anything, and yet 75, 100 feet away, she was able to see a snow mound where Officer O'Keefe was actually lying. That's going to be something that's going to be hard for the jury to compute, other than knowing that she knew where he was. That's kind of the takeaway. And we know when we get to the taillight, and it's like hearing, it's like it was cracked. There was a piece missing. That was important, because in the first trial, those words weren't said. It was like it was cracked or it was shattered or whatever it was. There was a piece missing. And what we know is that taillight, the piece missing, was found at 34 Fairview in the snow. Facts win cases. Very important. Full stop. Do you think the defense will receive extreme sanctions? I think the judge might be. That's an interesting question. I think something might be down the pipe, but I know the judge, until if there is a conviction and there is sentencing, it's probably deferred till then, so to not like affect how the trial is going. So I think what I'm going to do is maybe just a couple more minutes. Then I gotta unfortunately head out. In what I'm looking for tomorrow is Carrie Roberts continually to walk the jury through those moments that you see on the body cam footage. The defendant acting hysterically, the admissions, the fact that the individuals around them. It's like, did she notice anyone? I noticed Katie McLaughlin or whatever. The people there, so that when they go to watch the video again, they're like, okay, this person's here, that's that first responder. And so it's like all these people are saying the same thing. That is vital evidence for this case. And to be able to, as many people confirm that I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. So that when they're like, well, you didn't write this down. That was, I think that's my final point. What was such a great job by Hank Brennan this time around is explaining why he didn't write it down. These people, these first respondents, they're not detectives. Detectives would write down, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. But these are first responders. Their job is to try to save the victim, make sure that him the medical treatment. They're not investigators. They're not caring that it's like, oh, well, this is part of a vehicle crash. That's not their job. They are not detectives. They are not crash investigators. They are first responders. And being able to do that takes that kind of that bullet out of their chamber when they're like, you didn't write this down, which we know is going to keep coming. Was expected as fact, I suppose, it's just didn't know. Yeah. Is nails on a chalkboard. Yeah, it was just too long. Like, he made his point. Once you make your point, you got to sit down, especially on cross. I know lawyers and attorneys, they love to hear the sound in your voice. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the stream. But it still is, you need to know when to sit down. You just need to do that. And that's so difficult for attorneys, like hearing the sound of your voice, but it is paramount in trial advocacy to know when. It's like, at some point, you're just hurting. You're not getting any points. You're just losing them, and you're making the jury forget what they were supposed to. The takeaway from the cross is, he said I hit him twice in the first trial, and in the second trial, 3 times. And he might not have said in his grand jury testimony, which he probably, if they had it, should have been impeached with that. That would have been a stronger. So I was kind of shocked Alan Jackson didn't try to impeach him with his grand jury testimony if he didn't actually say that, if he didn't mention that in the first trial or in the grand jury testimony, because that he could have impeached him potentially with, as in prior inconsistent statement. So I think that's all we're going to do for today. Thank you. Subscribe. I will be tweeting throughout the week, and Thursday will be a hybrid, full show, probably closer to 45 minutes to an hour. We'll be talking Karen Reed and the NFL draft. If you're not a football fan, it won't hurt my feelings if you skip it. So it's pretty interesting. So I'll be talking about my clients and what it goes into the draft and what you have to do in preparation for it. And I'll also be talking about the testimony from this week. So have a nice night, everyone. And I'll be talking tomorrow on it. Thank you.